Good day. This is the God Says Ministries, the House of Fire. I'm Tabbas. So we're still in lockdown. And the media is still preaching fear. Preaching fear every day. Social media is blowing up with fear mongering, saying that we need to keep the lockdown locked down. As a person of God, as a child of Jesus, of Almighty, as a born-again Christian, this waiting to die is ridiculous. Waiting to die is ridiculous. I mean, I'm a missionary that goes to Uganda for 2 months at a time. I spent 2 months with my family in Uganda there, at an orphanage in the jungle, in the bush. And malaria is rife there. Malaria is rife there. The first trip I went over, I took malaria drugs with me, and I threw them away in the first 2 weeks because they were making me nauseous. Ever since then, I've never taken anything with me. I've taken mosquito repellent. At night, I put on mosquito cream so mosquitoes don't come near me when I'm sleeping and walking around. I put the mosquito cream on. Uganda is rife with yellow fever. Some of the children at the orphanage school are sufferers of yellow fever. One youngster, Charles, his name is, he has sickle cells. And because he has sickle cells, he has contracted yellow fever. But he lives on. He goes to school every day. And he lives on. He's not locked down in his house. Every now and then he ends up in a hospital with a low immune system, and he has to come out again and go back to living. Back to living. Millions of Ugandans live with the prospect of catching malaria. Many of the Ugandans have caught malaria, recurring malaria. Yet life goes on. Life goes on. Because it's part of life. It's part of the fallen world. It's part of who we are. Now you can believe the word of God as I do, and I walk into malaria-infested areas where there's yellow fever, where you're drinking water out of a borehole, or you're drinking water out of a tank, rainwater out of a tank that's been lying in there for months, with whatever else is in there. You're drinking milk out of the cow, straight from the cow, without pasteurizing or disinfecting the milk or anything like that, other than boiling it. You're slapping on mosquito cream to chase mosquitoes away. I sat one night holding the hands of a woman suffering from malaria, one of the teachers suffering from malaria, while mosquitoes bit her and bit me at the same time. But I took that chance because I know who I am. I know that God protects me. This lockdown is the stupidest thing I've ever seen or heard of. Locked down with your family in your house, worried about catching the COVID-19. Yet most families have diabetes in their house. Some families have TB in their house. Some families have HIV/AIDS in their house. Some families have heart problems in their house. Those are being lived with day in and day out. But yet, COVID-19 appears on the scene and we got to be locked down. A tattoo artist has got more chance of catching HIV/AIDS than this COVID-19. A hairdresser's got more chance of catching HIV/AIDS than this COVID-19. Yet hairdressers are getting arrested for opening a business in the US. Hairdressers, tattoo artists live with the chance of getting AIDS. Somebody who has AIDS, you accidentally snip them, and you have an open wound. That's how AIDS spreads, other than the sexual contact. But they live with that thing all the time. In the workplace, you live with people that you employ all the time who have, especially in South Africa, TB and HIV. We've learned to live with it. TB and HIV is rife here in South Africa. There are people working in businesses, for businesses, that have got one or the other, sometimes both at the same time, yet we do not lock that person away. This lockdown is enough now. It's enough now. Enough. And as Christians, born again Christians, we are supposed to be among the sick. We are supposed to be in the leper camp, healing the lepers. We have the authority to be in the leper camp. But notice, around the world, the one place that gets locked down, is the church. Locked down is the church. The one place where sick people need to go is the church of God, the body of Christ, to find their healing. Yet we locked down. I can't go and lay my hand on somebody in the street and pray for them because I'll be locked up for breaking the COVID-19 lockdown rules. Yet Jesus Christ laid his hand on all who were sick and healed them all. I am in Uganda, in the middle of the jungle. I could be bitten by a snake. I can be bitten by a poisonous spider. I could be attacked by people who are demon-possessed in witchcraft, because I'm in the witchcraft area. I can catch malaria. I can catch yellow fever. I can get all sorts of bacteria from the water. But that's the chance I take to do the work of God. That's the chance I take to live my life the way I know how. I spent a third of my life on the ocean. I'm an ex-commercial fisherman. I went out in seas that nobody else wouldn't go out because I had to pay the bills. I had to pay my accounts. I had to put food on the table. I was in winds up to 45, 50 knots. And my boat is not a yacht. 21 foot. And at times I had to run like 80-mile trips. Yes, there is many a time I should never have come home. And I should never be in seas. Those times when I should never come. But I came home every time. For my trust is in God, not in man. There is many a times that I should not be here. But it was my job. It was a dangerous job at times. You have sharks, great whites around the boat. You have whales, you have killer whales, and you have the elements. Storms at sea when lightning is striking in the water next to you. Gale force winds. Going against current that's going the other opposite way. Where top half of a 30-foot swell, 6 foot of it is breaking like you can go and surf. Yet I fished in it. Because it was my job. Yes, the crew that I knew then, that fished on the boats down there, most of them are dead. Most are dead. I would say 70% of them ended up in the ocean and were never found again. But we do this job for a reason, because it's the job we do. Hairdressers, tattoo artists, mechanics working with your hands, people who fell trees, working with chainsaws and stuff like this, people who are mining with dynamite, put their lives at risk every day because it's part of their work. Yet we locked the whole world down for a virus that death rate is no more than the flu. I've said this before when I've spoken out here. Africa has over 1.2 billion people. And just over 2,000 deaths for the entire Africa from the COVID-19. That mathematical equation does not add up to lockdown. It does not add up to lockdown. Even in my job as a commercial fisherman, I had guys on the boat with me who crewed for me, who were suffering from TB and AIDS. But I couldn't say, sorry, you can get off the boat because you're diseased. I had to work around the situation. Remembering that if he got a hook in him, or he got cut, or got bit by a shark, or something like that, or a fish, I had to work around that situation. That's what we do. We work around the situation. We do not lock ourselves up in a house and wait to die. We don't shut the economy down. We work around the situation. This shutdown, worldwide shutdown, is not about COVID-19. There's an agenda here, an evil agenda behind this. There's an evil agenda behind this. And it's not about COVID-19. It's time the world woke up. Every day you put yourself at risk. The moment you climb into your car, you're at risk of dying. You climb into a plane, you're at risk of dying. You eat too much fatty foods and fast foods, you are at risk of dying. We spray our crops with pesticides and then we eat them. You're at risk of dying. This has to stop. Enough is enough. The truth has to come out. All the thousands of years we have lived with risk in the workplace, in the play place. Formula One car racing. Risk. Running in the comrades or a marathon. Risk of dying of dehydration, heart attacks, strokes. Yet people still do it. This lockdown is enough. We are not locked down waiting to die. Our focus on life, living, and living an abundant life cannot be on death. It has to be on life. We have to live a life in abundance and not have this fear. The social media and the mainstream media have put this fear on us, not because of COVID-19, but because of an agenda that they are trying to hide from you. It's time to come out of our caves into the sunlight and say, no more. Enough is enough. Here and no further. As I said, I spent a third of my life on the ocean. And there were hundreds of times I should never have returned. Hundreds of incidents. But here I am. Others didn't make it in the same profession. Some have never been found. But we live on. We live on. And in the grace of God, and in the authority of God, and in the faith in God, we live our lives to the best of our ability in the calling that He's called us for. I'm hoping to go for another trip to Uganda. But yet they've locked down the airports. Locked down airports. Enough is enough. It's time to open up and to live our lives. We have been living for years with HIV. We've been living for years with TB. We've been living for years with malaria. We've been living for years with yellow fever. Nobody locked it down, the countries, or the world for that. For the flu, we've been living with years for. Thousands and thousands of people die of the flu every year. Thousands of people die of AIDS every year. Thousands of people die of TB every year. We have never locked it down for that. We've been living with it. With it in mind, but with it. It's time to open up. It's time to open up or tell us the truth. What is your agenda? What is your true agenda keeping this place locked down? Keeping this world locked down? Because it's not about the COVID-19. This is not about the COVID-19. We already know that the COVID-19 is no more worse than the flu. We already see this. It's no more worse than the flu. And banning the hydroxychloroquine is a telltale sign of your agenda. There's an agenda. Many places across the world inject heroin, cocaine into junkies. They inject it into them to keep them off the street, to try and keep disease from flowing. So they give it to them. Yet you won't give the sick with the COVID-19 hydroxychloroquine, which we know works, which we know is cheap, and we know is regularly available. Uganda, as I say, I go to the mission fields there. I go to a family there and I spend 2 months with them. And we do the whole Uganda. We go to the school and what have you. Uganda is rife with malaria. Uganda has got 0 COVID-19 deaths. Zero. Why do you think that is? Probably one of their main medicine in Uganda is hydroxychloroquine for malaria drugs, the malaria drug. This is a farce. This is a farce. There are more people dying of depression and anxiety and suicide and domestic abuse in this lockdown than there are people dying of COVID-19. Then there are people dying of COVID-19. There are people dying of heart attacks and strokes because of the stress of COVID-19 locking them away. There are people dying of starvation because they cannot get to the food or their jobs. There is more people dying of starvation, heart attacks, strokes, suicide, domestic violence than there is ever going to be of anybody dying of COVID-19. This has to stop, and the people have to say, yeah and no more. It is time for this to end. It's time for this to end. How can you in the US and New York, the governor in the US and New York, send people who are tested positive for COVID-19 into old age homes? Why would you do that? To the most vulnerable, to the one that the COVID-19 affects the most, the elderly and the weak. Why would you put COVID-19 patients with them if you don't have an agenda? If you don't have a depopulation agenda? Why would you put them with them? You know, we've been brought up with this evolution Darwin's theory, evolution, the survival of the fittest. The survival of the fittest. And the kids were taught about survival of the fittest in the evolution theory for all these years now. So their excuse is going to be it's survival of the fittest. And most children are going to say, yes, that's what we were taught. But that is a lie. It is a lie from the pit of hell. A lion in the jungle, in the bush, chasing down a buck or a buffalo, that is survival of the fittest. Taking sick people and putting them in the same room as vulnerable people, that is pure utter murder, genocide. That is genocide. That's deliberate killing people. Deliberately killing people. Putting sick people with vulnerable people in the same complex is deliberately killing people. Deliberately. And this is the governor of New York's decision. And you tell me there's no agenda behind it, it's all about a coronavirus. You tell me it's all about a coronavirus. And you put sick people with vulnerable people. And then your numbers skyrocket, death numbers skyrocket. Your agenda is in plain sight to see. Enough is enough. We've been living with diseases on this earth for thousands of years. For thousands of years. The only time you lock yourself in a house and hide away is when bullets fly. This is ridiculous. And we know the masks don't work. We know the gloves don't work. You put gloves on your hands, you go to the supermarket, you're picking up things, you're touching your face, you're touching your nose, you're adjusting your mask. Please, people, it's a farce. These precautions with masks on, everything, it's a farce. You have to put the mask on. You're walking around, it's moving around, and you're adjusting it the whole time. You're touching your face, you're touching everything. You're touching the surface whether you got gloves on or not. The virus is on the gloves, you're still touching your face. It's a farce. We have been locked down to die, and waiting to die. That's the life they want you to live. They want you locked down and waiting to die. Until you submit to their authority. So basically what they're doing is waterboarding you. Waterboarding you until you submit to their authority. Brainwashing you until you submit to their authority. You are being brainwashed so that you become puppets and robots to every request and button they push. Through the fear of the unknown, which is not unknown because we've been living for years with disease. Why now? Why now? Why are they trying to take out the wise? The wisdom of the earth, the elderly, who have lived through plagues, who have lived through disease, who've worked all their life in environments where death could easily happen. Why do they want to remove the whys? Why have they taught the children of today, the millennials of today, evolution? Why have they taught the children, the millennials of today,